everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I, of course, am your host, Coach Camp, and we are down here in the casually creative studios of SRP with Mr. Derek Michaud. Welcome back to another amazing episode. I have a treat for you guys today. It is a guest from out of town. I got to tell you, whenever I started this podcast over a year and a half ago, I did not have any real idea about what it would look like, what directions it could go. I just knew I wanted it to be positive. I wanted it to be impactful. I wanted it to have some meaning and something that people could relate to and draw strength from. And along the way, it turns out you really don't have to have it all figured out in life. Sometimes it just comes to you. And that is where this week's guest came from, was to me. They're looking through some of the videos. His assistant reaches out to me, says, "Hey, look, my boss got a great story. You should maybe think about it." So I talked to him. This individual is from Indiana, the northern section of Indiana. I don't want to tell you too much about him. His name is Mr. Casey Smith. He runs and operates Casey's Remodeling. He's been doing this for about 5 years. We're going to learn all about him. He has an amazing story, something I know you guys want to stay tuned into and hear all about. So at this time, please welcome with me, Mr. Casey Smith. How are you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. So drove down here from Indiana.
Yep.
How was that?
Good.
Good?
It's fine. Yeah. It's pretty easy.
I'll tell you what, there's a few areas in Coach Camp's life I'm not as positive, and that is road rage.
Sure.
So, yeah, whenever I get into certain areas, certain cities, it's like everybody turns off the I know how to drive moment, and it's just in and out of traffic, and then, whew. So, thankfully, no incidents, right?
None.
All right. So, look, I don't want to get too much information. I want you to tell your story. So if you would, I like to tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about my guest. So share with me, where you're from, family, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Casey Smith. I'm born and raised in Lafayette, Indiana, which, like you said, is northern part of Indiana. It's right between Chicago and Indianapolis. So it's kind of best of both worlds. You got a little bit of city if you travel, country if you go outside. So born and raised there. Went to high school there, played baseball, basketball, football. Went to college in eastern part of Indiana, a place called Ball State University. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Did you go there on scholarship?
No, okay. I wish. No, I was there for 4.5 years, I think. So just born and raised in Indiana. Was an athlete my entire life till I got older.
Do you have any brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I have an older brother. I'm the youngest of three. So I have a half brother who's quite a bit older than me. And then my brother I grew up with, Vince, he's, I think, 4 years older than me. Okay.
And growing up, mom and dad,
Yep.
What were they doing? What was their jobs?
Blue collar, working hard. Mom worked at State Farm for 47 years.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Dad was a vice president of a construction company. They built churches all over the world.
Really?
All over the United States. Yep. Mississippi, Texas.
One thing I know about construction workers, and you being in construction, you can attest to this, you got to have a lot of patience.
Oh, yeah.
I've built 3 houses, not like, me physically, but like contracting it out.
Sure.
They really test my patience.
There's a lot of moving parts.
So many moving parts. Getting people to do what they're supposed to do.
Sure. There's so many moving parts. I mean, you got materials. Yeah. You got the workers. Everybody has a role to fill.
It's a special type of personality to get there.
It's a personality type we hire.
Yeah.
I mean, it really
makes sense. I'm with you.
I don't care about resumes. I don't care about somebody's background. I care about somebody's personal or how they're wired, their personality type. Like Scott, who I brought with me, he's the head project
got some
manager.
Guests here, yeah.
He runs everything for me. I can't do his job. He can't do my job. When it comes to a punch list, A comes before B, B before C. He can look down at a complex issue and he can put it together. I don't have the attention span for something like that. I can market. I can get the job. I can manage the money. I can make sure everybody's paid, workman comp, insurance, marketing. But when it comes to the execution part of it, no.
Hey, full disclosure.
Sure.
You're a smart person to hire smart people, not to tell them what to do, so that they can tell you what to do.
Absolutely.
And what your areas are that you're not great
Sure.
in.
But with that being said, these guys they run the show. They really do. That's the honest to God truth. I'm the owner, but they run the show. I don't just push them into the fire and they do. No, they know what they're doing. I'm not hiring idiots. The people who are running the company not only have proven they know what they do. I rely on them probably more than they rely on me.
Look, full disclosure, same thing here.
Sure. The trust.
Without Derek, I'm just a man in a room looking weird, talking to himself. So all of this happens because of him.
Sure.
Much the same with you, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, and my assistant, Kelsey, is another big one.
She's the reason you're here.
Example A, you know what I mean? I mean, she goes above and beyond. I mean, she had a book before we came here. She spent 3 days making, hey, don't say anything stupid. We need to go over this. They run my life. They really do.
You sure she doesn't know my wife?
Yep.
On a daily basis, I'm told don't say something stupid.
Right.
So I try never to say her name unless you can. So it's like, I'm like, all right, I will keep it calm. I will keep it very calm.
No, she really runs the show, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I get it.
Yep.
So she's actually the reason why we kind of got to, be able to meet each other, talk to each other. Today's the first time I've actually met you.
Correct.
Which is something I think is valuable for my listeners and viewers too, because I do have a lot of friends, lifelong friends that I've had on the show that have gone on to do amazing things. But this is the part of the show that really touches me, humbles me in so many ways, is coming in contact with people all over the United States, all over the world, that have amazing stories that relate. I think that speaks volumes to the fact that we're not in bubbles. And if you don't travel, it's easy to think that this is only happening to you or your community
100%.
or whatever.
100%.
You're getting to show that it's everywhere.
In every aspect of life.
Yeah.
In business and politics. I mean, just getting out there. I mean, you can just see the differences in everything. I couldn't agree more with you there.
Absolutely. So growing up, playing sports, the triple sport guy, what were you thinking? Were you thinking pro or...
No.
What direction were you going in when you were a kid?
I was thinking girls, sports.
Fair.
I mean, I was an athlete. I was good. I was dedicated to sports. I mean, I was just a normal kid. We went fishing in the summer, and if I wasn't in school, I was playing sports, and if I wasn't in sports, I was like a normal, middle school, high school guy. Girlfriend. You know.
So going out, you said you went to college?
I did.
4 years?
I did.
Where'd you study there?
Business, but I did not graduate from Ball State.
Okay.
That was I was already probably well into my addiction by the time. So I started off at a community college to get the core classes out of the way. I didn't know what to do after high school. That's God's honest truth. No idea. I knew what parents and people in society told you. Oh, you go off to college. No, I've been the same my entire life. If I had the head on me that I do now, then I would have went into business then. I had a lawn care company, me and this guy, at a young age. I was knocking on doors, mowing yards in the wintertime. Northern Indiana, we get terrible winters. We were plowing snow, working. So college was just the thing that I heard you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I was out of my comfort zone, but I was pretty outside of my comfort zone there. I know school wasn't for me. I'm not saying anything negative. If that's what somebody wants to do after high school, more power to them.
Yeah, Casey, I'll tell you this. I've had this conversation a lot. I'm a college professor, actually. So
Nice.
One other thing I didn't throw in there. But being a retired firefighter paramedic, a lot of people will come to me straight out of high school looking for some mentorship or guidance.
Sure.
And much to what you just said, they think they have to do something because that's what they've been told or that's what they've seen other people do.
Yep.
The thing I always impart on them is don't be afraid to try something.
Sure.
But don't think you have to do something. Try things because you're not going to know what's really going to click unless you try some different stuff.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that. I would say passion's a big one too, and then personality type. Right? Not everybody is a business owner. Not everybody is an athlete. Find something you like to do. Or passionate about, right? And then chase that dream. The world's changed so much. This isn't 1960s, 70s anymore. Where
people are making millions on TikTok.
Doing nothing. Yeah, TikTok.
I know. Streaming a ball game or something. I don't know.
You can make money doing anything.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, there's a monetary value to pretty much anything. To anything you do. You want to go put together, tinker on an engine, film it, put it on social media. So
that's a great point.
It kind of cuts down a little bit as far as hey, you have to go to college. And I'm not swaying anybody away from college.
No,
I don't.
get it.
If that's somebody's passion and they want that bachelor's, master's degree, more power to them.
Sure.
Hats off. My girlfriend just got her master's. She's great at that stuff. It's just not for me personally. I'm more of somebody who, with the personality type, as kind of get into something, figure it out yourself. And build something. I take pride in stuff like that, and bringing childhood friends along the way with me, and building something.
Who do you think was one of your bigger influences growing up?
Great question. I don't have a short answer for that.
I didn't give him notes on this, by the way, guys. It's like all raw cut.
Sure.
In the moment.
Sure. I've always been a guy, who just went out and did things. I talk a lot. I think I can.
You're on the right place.
Yeah, sure. Talk my way on anything. And same as a young kid with business, knocking on doors. Hey, can we do your driveway? Clean your gutters. So I've always kind of fended for myself and not relied on a job or something.
Where do you think that came from?
Man, if I had to guess, I would say my grandparents. So we were raised, they're all from Germany. My family was immigrants after World War II. And my grandmother, and my grandfather was a business guy, and my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom. She was a homemaker. And she was just a blue-collar, hard worker, came from nothing, built herself a great life, principles, values, and go out and get it. If you want it, go get it.
I think that there's so much validity to both sides of this, and that is sometimes a person will find an individual that they latch onto and they want to emulate.
Sure.
And then there are those, and I'm catching this a little bit from this vibe from you, if you will, a little bit of those that are just born and they're wired different, and they just chase the path that is in front of them that feels like that's the moment I want to go after, and they're ambitious in that.
Sure.
And it seems like that's kind of who you were.
And there's pros and cons to each personality.
Sure.
One of the cons, like you just explained, of my personality is there's not a person in front of me that I can say, oh, he did it this way.
Right.
I'm a fool.
I relate with this, Casey.
Right. In a way, because a lot of the wheel's not being created. There's something I could go watch a podcast. I can go over to somebody who's done it, been through it all, and just say, hey, what should I do here? A lot of times, my ego, you could say ego gets in the way, or just, hey, a sense of pride or a sense of foolishness, to be honest with you. A lot of it is foolishness, a lot of times. And what's nice about my company is I don't just make the decisions. It is all a team.
Yeah.
It is a team. I mean, there's nothing, maybe the marketing aspect is more Kelsey and I would say that. But when it comes to big decisions, hey, what do we want to do here, marketing or excuse me, business-wise? What do we want to do here? How do we solve this problem? I don't have the best answer every time.
Yeah.
They'll say to me all the time, Scott in particular will say, you're an idiot. No, what do you think of that? I'll say, hey, you're wrong. And then I think about it. Okay, he's right. Or we'll go back and forth a lot of times respectively and just get each other's inputs, because we're totally two different people, 100% different people. He is the hang out by the water, fish all day type of guy. I'm the guy who wakes up at 4 a.m., nothing to do. I'm running 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to figure something out, find something to do. So I respect different opinions, points of views. I don't just take them from anybody. I take it from the people I trust around me.
Yeah.
And this is long-term trust. This guy's been one of my best friends since 6th grade. So it's not like anything new. If he tells me something, he's serious, I'll take it into consideration every time.
I think that one of the characteristic traits of being a person that is successful, thinking outside the box, is they've got to have a willingness to accept the idea there could be failure.
Sure.
But they take that failure and they grow from it.
Sure.
And so a person that is not willing to fail and they're really safe in life, they're not usually going to have big gains. You got to have big risks to have big gains.
My biggest lessons in life were from failures. Addiction.
Yeah, we're about to dive all up into that one. Yeah,
and I'll be honest with you, and I'll say this now. I might be getting ahead here, but I don't regret any of them.
Yeah,
I remember them. I mean, whether from a childhood, doing something stupid. It's kind of like don't touch the hot stove. I'm the kid who touched the hot stove. I don't know.
Let me see about that.
Right,
Let me see how hot that stove is. Trust me,
100%.
Casey, I don't know if you know this. We might be related.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Wouldn't
weird.
Surprise me.
It's so many characteristic traits that you're spitting out right now.
Personality
My
type.
mom, she listens to all these. She's a big supporter. #LoveMom. And she's all the time like, yeah, I remember this as you as a child and that when you did this as a child. People say think outside the box. I never found the box. I don't even know where it is.
Sure.
So I don't even know how to think inside of a box. I don't know where the box is.
So I'm going to tell you this. I'm the spitting image of my mother.
Okay.
So if people think I'm nuts, oh God.
They should meet her.
Yeah, God, she's wild. She's a wild one in a good way.
Yeah, sure. #LoveMoms.
Yep,
Mother's Day was just recently. So yeah, no disrespect there.
Sure.
I love that. So, a big part of what I'd like to do being in construction, you don't mind the analogy here. You got to build a great foundation.
Absolutely.
If you have a crappy foundation, I don't care how great the structure looks, it ain't going to last.
Sure.
So big part of that from my guest is I really want my listeners and viewers to really grab on to who is the person on the other side of this microphone.
Sure.
I could just come in here and go straight to a storyline. Sure. Right. All right. And then you hear point A to point B, which is really what my wife likes. She likes the succinctness. She's like, just get to the punchline.
Sure.
I'm like, girl, you missed the story. Right. You got to get the meat in the sandwich. You don't want 2 pieces of bread.
Sure.
So you got to build the story. And part of the story a lot of times for people is them understanding, where you came from as a child growing up, where you thought you were headed at least, and then maybe whatever that moment was that changed some of the course of your life, but then how you came through that. And so for me on my podcast, I've had everything from people that have had PTSD from going to war.
Sure.
I've had definitely addiction. I've had people that were bullied growing up, or they had really bad lives at their house. Right. So really there's always something that's unique to the individual that altered where they are now versus where they thought they were going. So clearly, Casey, as we're building into the story now, you've mentioned a couple times about your addiction. So what I wanted people first to see was who was Casey growing up and what was the ideas, dreams, goals of Casey Smith, and then build the story about where you saw the problems starting, how they started, and what they were.
Sure. So I had a fantastic childhood. Fantastic. I had family members who drank and smoked, but I have nothing negative to say about my childhood whatsoever. Great family, great dad, great mother, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. So as far as family structure goes, I was blessed, still am. I've had a supportive family my whole life, whether it was sports, whether it was business. So in that regard, there's nothing, unique or negative. Sports was a big part of my life. That's my older brother Vince we grew up on sports. That was the highlight of our lives. As far as dreams and ambitions go, if it wasn't sports, I always knew I wanted to do something myself. I wouldn't say I have a problem with authority or rules, but I would like to be in charge of my own kingdom.
I'm with you. I get it. Sure. Military was hard for me.
Sure.
I was not very good conformist.
I'll be very clear with this. I have no problem listening from an outside perspective. But they have to, I found myself like, they hit a chord with me. And I'm like, okay, this guy's speaking my language here. Or somebody who's overly qualified or qualified in that regard. I'll listen all day long. I don't think I have the best answers. I don't.
I'm with you.
When I speak, I use something I refer to as selective verbiage. And by that, I mean, I say from my experience is how I start things off. When I talk about addiction, I don't say you do this, do this, do this. No, that's irrelevant. I say from my experience, this has worked for me. But there's a million other things that have worked for other people. Right?
It's wise. It's very wise.
And it doesn't matter where they start from, as long as we end up in the same place, and that's the goal would be sobriety. So, and I'm referring to addiction right now because this is what this is about. But yeah, I try to do a good job of saying just my story. And if it can help one person out or somebody relates to it and it clicks with them, hey, I've done my job.
Yeah.
So back to my childhood, sports. Grew up around sports fans. Chicago Cubs were my
You're a Cubs guy?
I am a Cubs guy. So
you like Rizzo?
I liked Rizzo.
He's on my team.
Yeah, now. Sure, yeah, sure. My family are diehard Cubs fan. I'm too ADD to sit and watch a baseball game.
It is a little bit. It's faster now, though.
Yeah, I'll play all day long. You want to go play stickball or get
You're down.
I'll play for 8 hours, man. I'm like a big 12-year-old kid. I'll never change in that regard. But yeah, sports were a big one. Basketball. Grew up, watching the Pacers, Bulls. As crazy as that is to sound, was a big Jordan guy, a big Reggie Miller guy.
Jordan, best player ever. Just
ever.
My opinion.
If anybody on this podcast disagrees,
I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care.
Probably won't like me. I'm a Jordan guy. Yeah.
Michael.
I think they're all great. Don't get me wrong. Athletes,
no comparison.
Think they're all great, but
Jordan's the best.
We can have a podcast about this.
We could
all day long.
We could. Sometimes I get. I don't want to call it hate mail, but I get disagreements mail.
Sure.
It's all right.
And nothing.
I have
against,
an opinion.
And nothing against LeBron. I watch him. I'm in awe. I can't.
He's not Michael.
Right, he's not. He's not. He's amazing.
He is amazing.
But
he is good.
But anyway, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. ADD. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So you growing up playing sports?
Yep. In Indiana, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this or not, but in Indiana, basketball is a big deal.
Oh, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
My listeners know.
It's like
you know
religion.
Who Gary Parrish is? He's a CBS announcer. He announces a lot of Grizzly games and stuff.
Okay.
He was on. You'll talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I grew up, I was in the same conference with like Gordon Hayward, plays for the Celtics. Eric Gordon went to North Central. Gordon Hayward went to Brownsburg High School. We beat them in our conference championship 2008. So, I mean, a lot of good guys. AAU against Eric Rose. He went to a high school in Chicago called Simeon. And I could go on and on with some great players from Indiana around that area. Josh McRoberts, big one. Oh, I'd have to think here. Oh, Greg Oden, Mike Conley, baseball, Drew Storn, Lance Lynn. I mean, these are some big-time names. So, yeah, I mean, sports were a big deal growing up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was nowhere near any of those guys. Yeah. Right? I mean, nowhere near. I remember watching Eric Gordon play. He went to a high school called North Central, and I was like, oh, when people talk about a different level.
We got Austin Riley here in town. He lives down here. You know Austin Riley, third baseman for the Braves?
I don't, but I don't watch a lot of
he's
sports anymore.
That boy's a stud.
Yeah. Yeah, so basketball was a big deal. We followed it. One of my best friends in the world. I mean, when I say obsessed, you can't name a player and ask him where he went to college or where he's from and him not have an answer. Yeah. So basketball was a huge deal. I was all in. I was all in that. That was my life. My brother would take me to the courts when it was nice out. We'd go inside if it was raining, and we just played sports growing up. Family, like I was referring to earlier, my grandmother was from Bavaria, Germany. Moved over here after World War II. I was extremely close with her. She was what I call the matriarch of her family, the boss. What she says went. There was no back talking. Yeah. And I was a challenger, man. Anybody tells me something, no, I'm fighting, not with her.
It's a challenge now. Yeah,
sure.
You can't. Oh, watch this. Right. In Mississippi, we have a term. It's called "hold my beer."
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're about to find out.
Sure.
It doesn't always work out, especially when you're young, like I was, and get in trouble a lot. But nevertheless.
Yeah. I mean, I got in trouble as a kid. Like I said, I was a talker, wild in school. I got you. Teacher said something, I did opposite. I wasn't a bad kid. Right. I've always beat on my own drum. Went to the beat of my own drum.
So when did you get exposed to? Because this is a big part of the story now. So what I want people to know too is this is how much this means to Casey Smith. Again, we've established you didn't know me prior to this, and when you found out about my podcast, kind of what the platform is and what it speaks to, and the volume of people that chime in on these topics, he saw the value in coming down here to Mississippi to be on the podcast. What you need to know is the option is you can Zoom in, but he knew the importance of being in studio and feeling that energy and knowing that this message matters, and it matters so much about what you're about to talk about. You want to make sure you connect with people on this.
And I'm going to give you some credits here. Speaking with you on the phone that day, we talked for like 2 hours months ago, damn near 2 hours, right? Your passion is what sold it to me. Okay, this is not a guy just trying to get an episode in. This is somebody who cares. I mean, just talking about your past guests. Yeah, I remember the story. He started these facilities or whatnot, helping people get sober, and the passion. We were like looking. I was like looking in the mirror, and we were just interrupting. Just this passion was just, it was just there. That was a big one to me. I remember I called my assistant when we hung up. I told her, I said, I have some good news and bad news. The good news is we're going down to Mississippi. The bad news is your husband's coming with me. So
welcome to the party, Scott.
Yeah, for sure. So no, that was great to see, man. And there's value in it. There's value in people who are passionate about this topic, right? And getting the word out there.
That's the key. And people feel alone sometimes. Yes, they don't think anyone else is going through it.
It was so taboo for so long, and I was guilty of it. My family's guilty of it. Nobody wants to use the words addiction and opiates and he's struggling. Nobody wants to talk about stuff like that. And I didn't want to for years and years. I'm an open book now. I do not care. I will tell you the truth about this. And as long as it's the truth, that's the only thing I care about personally. Sure. If it can help somebody, it sucks. It's hell. That's fact. There's no debating that. We're talking on the way here. And I know I said this to you too in the past. The unique thing about addiction, it does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, black, white, Muslim, Christian, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
It sucks. Withdrawals suck. Withdrawals suck whether you're in a penthouse or underneath a bridge. It's the same feeling. Money doesn't get you far with addiction or recovery, I'm saying. You can say, hey, I'll write a check for $1 million, make these withdrawals go away. Well, sure, they're going to put you on something. Well, they're going to put you on methadone, Suboxone, Subutex. Well, sure, it's the same thing for everybody, right? So that's why it takes this unique collective group of people, and you put this together. You go to a good NA group, right? And you hear people talking. It is a unique bunch of people all suffering from the same thing, helping each other out. They leave there. Some people might go to their mansion. Some people might go to, low income. It doesn't matter. Nobody's there judging. The guy with the gold can be the poorest guy in the room or giving the best message. And the other guy's sitting back and he's getting something from it. There's very few things like that in life, where power is, it
knows no boundaries.
Yeah, it has no boundaries. And I love that part of it. That aspect of it really, really I love. I mean, I've had some great meetings, man. There's places in Indianapolis, what people would call a rough area. It's called Hallville. And years and years ago, I started going to NA there. And people are like, be careful, it's rough down there. The best meetings I've ever been to. Yeah. I was then listening and I was like, man, there's gold in this guy's story. Like you can feel it, you hear it in his voice, and he's yelling, but he's not yelling at you. He's passionate about this topic. And I remember leaving there. I wasn't ready to get sober. Oh, I wouldn't get sober till years later, but I remember being like, I get this.
And I think probably, now don't let me put words in your mouth.
Sure.
You probably saw a path. You probably saw that there's a possibility here.
Sure. I saw the realness in it. That's what I love, the realness, the truth, the honesty, because these guys aren't sitting there tooting their horn like, I'm sober, I'm clean. It's like, dude, look, I went through hell to get here. I lost A, B, C, D, and these A, B, C, Ds, these were huge things. His wife, his family. I remember that guy lost 3 sons to addiction of overdose, 3 kids. How much more qualified do you have to be to speak? And I remember the passion in this guy's voice. And I'm not an emotional guy. I'm not, but I remember sitting back there. I'm like, okay, I get it, dude. I get it. And my respect level from there on out was like, I was afraid for the longest time to get involved with NA because I wasn't ready to be sober, but I knew there was good stuff there.
So share with me how it started.
Sure. So I'm going to probably mess up on my dates here a little bit, but
that's okay.
Let me tell you from my memory. So I had
rough ages.
Sure. The first time I ever tried an opiate was after surgery. I was young. I was probably 12, 13 years old.
What was the surgery for?
You don't want to know.
Okay.
Can I say it? It's kind of awkward. I had varicose veins on my testicles, so
it's not a big deal.
I'm an open book, man. I don't give a damn.
This is a grown people show.
Okay,
it's fine.
I had varicose veins on my testicles
at
a young age. I was in middle school, and I'll never forget this story. I was prescribed something, a blue little pill. It said Watson 350 on it. It was a 1,000 milligram Loratab, and I knew nothing about drug classes. I knew nothing. I knew this, though. I knew when my mother filled that prescription and I took that pill for the first time, I was a god. There was no other feeling. There was nothing you could throw my way that would stress me out that I couldn't handle in my mind. This is from the inside looking out. Maybe not the same from the outside looking in, right? But I'll never forget that feeling. So for years after that, I was searching for a blue Watson 350, not knowing that there's a million other opiates. There's this drug class. There's Percocet, Loratab. I could go on and on, but I didn't know that. So I didn't do anything else for years and years and years. And then, when I got in high school, for the most part, I played a lot of sports. I was just like a normal.
So were you able to get that pill?
Get what? No, never found it again until later. So years later, then I was in high school by that time. I think probably by my senior year, because in high school, I didn't, I wasn't a pothead. I didn't drink a lot. I mean, I did, but not a lot. There's nothing I didn't try, but I wasn't, that wasn't my focus.
But that feeling that you got never left you.
Only came from opiates. Alcohol never gave me that. Marijuana surely never gave me that. Nothing. No Adderall. Nothing gave me the feeling like opiates did. It was, when I say, comfortable in my own skin, in my brain, I was the man on opiates. And years later, I tried them again my senior year, and then I started to realize, there's different forms of this pill. It's not just a blue Watson 350. There's oxycodone, Oxycontin, there's a million. And I started to dabble a little bit the end of my senior year. And I just love that feeling. And the only thing that kind of prevented me right then and there from jumping in was sports. High school still. I was had to be held accountable. There was baseball season, basketball season, football season, right? So I was so busy with life and sports, I didn't do it. But it was like the day after I graduated high school, my I wasn't expected to be at school on time. I didn't have baseball games, basketball games, practices. So now I'm going into this sense of freedom in my brain where I can do what I want a little bit. And it was on. I mean, it was on from there. And, at the time, right before the epidemic, it wasn't hard to get opiates.
I was about to ask you, how did you get them in high school? Did you have did you hang around certain people? Or?
Well, these certain people aren't the people you think.
I don't know.
I saw somebody with a cast on, and I'm like, oh hell, I bet you they got some good ones. I had friends, or hey, you got a tooth pulled? They probably gave you some 500 milligram Lortabs. You gonna take them all? If not, let me give you $1 each for them. I mowed. I had money saved up. I just go, hey, $50.
See, I was curious if there was like a group of folks you hung around and they were like your dealers, so to speak. Or you just sought out opportunities?
That's later. That's years later.
Okay. So right now it's just seeking out opportunities.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. And they were available. I mean, back then we're talking 2008.
Okay.
Right. So 2008, you can go to the doctor, get a tooth pulled. You're getting a prescription.
And pain clinics.
Right. But those didn't blow up until the epidemic.
That's
right.
True.
And then people just it's a money grab now, man.
Sure
so they just were popping up. But it was so easy. I probably took like Lortabs. I would think in my brain, as long as I do them twice a week at 3 p.m., I'm going to be fine. So I had the sense of control over it. Completely BS. I had no control over it then.
Yeah.
I was still doing the right things. It wasn't evident that I was an addict yet, but I was well on my way.
Right.
And then, after doing that for, I'd say, a year and a half, then I was introduced to OxyContin.
Was any of that at that time interfering with your day-to-day activities?
In my brain, I thought I was doing those day-to-day activities better.
Okay.
Now, affecting relationships, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say so because now there's something filling this void in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and a big one is sex drive. You're an 18, 19, 20-year-old man, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whatever. I think not having that, now you have this opiate in you, and now you're kind of numb, you're comfortable in your own skin. So there's something that was filling this void for me, whether it was a positive or a negative thing. Of course, it was negative, but sure, a lot of things suffered. I had a mowing company then, I got to the point at first where it was nice to mow after taking a couple pills. And then it came to the point, I can't mow without a couple pills. And then a month later, I can't mow without 10 pills, right? And then this addiction's building up and up. You do that.
What period of time do you recognize that this is happening? Can you put a span on it? Because like what you're saying is like you take some,
sure,
because it's like, oh, this makes it easier to mow, whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't even go out there and do this unless I have
So what I call that was my fun time.
Okay.
So the fun time was probably a year and a half, 2 years, where it was still fun. I was still taking care of my responsibilities, being a productive member of society. Not really until there's kind of different phases in my life. I look at my addictions. Second phase would be OxyContin. So when I was 21 years old, I was introduced to OxyContin, and OxyContin was an extremely
How were you introduced to just
off the street?
vendors?
Yeah, sure. And the 80s were these little green things, and at the beginning, these 80s you can put in your mouth and suck off the I don't know what you referred to, the top of it, right? And you can crush them down and snort them. So they were originally time release if you pop them in your mouth orally, right? But if you snort them, you get the rush right away. So that was a different level of feeling there. Then you're Superman on those. The downside about those at the time in 2009, 2010, the 80s were $50, $60 a pop. But the good thing is they were so powerful, I didn't need 20 of them a day. At first, I needed one of them a day.
At $80 a day.
Oh yeah, that was nothing. 60, 80, yeah, for sure, that was nothing.
And how old are you at that time?
20, but I was making my own money. I had a mowing company, so
yeah.
I wasn't relying on anybody. It wasn't like I was living paid. If I needed more money, I'd work harder and go mow and landscape and do what I needed to do. I had money saved up, man. Like in high school, I was always hustling. I sold knockoff Coach purses, Coach watches. Have purse parties with people.
You were ambitious and entrepreneurial.
Yes.
At a very early age.
Sure, yeah, and I always saved. I saved, invested, so I was always business savvy, good with money. So I wasn't robbing, Peter to pay Paul at that age. No, I was using. So I was good. I was hurting nobody. In my brain,
justify stuff,
justifying it, and that happened. And man, and I had the biggest ego too. The biggest ego. I thought, well, God, those guys have to steal to.
I'm crushing it.
These are low. people, because they have to screw people up. Not me. I can go mow. I have a work ethic. No, BS.
Yeah,
I was doing the same thing. I just had an outlet to get money. It's all the same game, man. And so OxyContin was a big one for me. I started using OxyContin, and then my addiction really progressed. The reason why, the difference between just like taking orally Loratab or Percocet or something like that, it sucks if you don't have them, but you're not in hell.
Yeah, you're not craving
you
it to the
withdraw
point.
from OxyContin after using them for a couple of years, you're in hell, dude. I mean, you're hot, cold, sweating, can't sleep, insomnia's through the roof. I don't care how tough a man or woman is. That is so much. Nobody's built to go through withdrawals like that. You're not. I mean, you can't you're back and forth to the bathroom. You can't stop throwing up. It's the worst feeling. I mean, you're sweating, but you're shivering, and I was getting into my early 20s at that point, I'd say.
Did anybody know at this time in your life that there was a problem?
I did really well at hiding it because I still was taking care of business on the outside. I was enrolling at Ball State University after I was done at Ivy Tech, which is our local community college. So I was still taking care of business. The reason why a lot of people didn't know is because I had the money for it, right? I was working my butt off. I was going to class and I was mowing, and I was doing the things from the outside looking in that were productive, right? Like I wasn't.
Was there any signals or signs you think your family or friends were picking up?
Sure, yeah. I would say, especially at nighttime, I wasn't going out with my friends. I was, after the long day, I was just kind of hanging out. My buddies were, in college, over at Purdue, and
sure, you're gonna go kick it.
Right. The average 21-year-old was going out
to
the
bars.
Now, that wasn't really me at that age.
So that definitely would stand out.
Big time. Yeah.
I'll point that out because I think that it's easy for people to see the facade that's there,
sure,
but not feel like they can say something about it. And so I'm just curious to the fact of how much that stood out and if somebody started to try to interject.
So that's a great question that I don't have the answer to.
Okay.
You'd have to ask somebody who was looking from the outside in.
Sure.
From my perspective, my group of people around me got smaller, right? I've had the same best friends my whole life. They haven't changed. There's Jordan, Timmy, Scott. I could go down. They're all the same friends. So I kept in touch, but I started to separate myself because I can't go out and hang out and go to a barbecue or play in a pickup game if I don't have my OxyContin, right? So in that regard, you could probably, Casey's not hooping with us anymore. Why? So that kind
there
of
was flags, but nothing that was so drastic. It's
big
like
time.
We need an intervention.
Big time. And the other thing is, I would lie my ass off if you ask me. No, I'm not one of them. I'm not a drug addict. That was the worst word. That was like a low person. He has no control over it. No, in my mind, I had full control over it. And my ego, I'll keep bringing up the word ego, is because the ego has been one of the biggest factors, both negatively and positively. My ego's helped me in life. My ego's, for the most part, really sank me in life.
I think it's balance, right?
It is.
Everything in life can have a yin to a yang,
sure.
if you will.
And really, that's why I also bring up the word a lot of, like, truth. You'll never hurt my feelings with words. You can say whatever you want to me, not you in particular, anybody can say it, but words, if it's the truth, I will, sure, it'll be hard to hear, but I'm not going to sit there and cry and pout about it. All I want in life is to know the truth, right? If the truth can help somebody or hurt somebody, it sucks, but it's the truth.
It's not cliche to say the truth will set you free.
Sure,
that is real.
Sure.
That's very real statement.
Right. Or you can always, that's your baseline. Truth is always your baseline. It's
because
your
what were you
starting
doing?
point. Right.
You were lying to yourself for years.
Right. And everybody else around me. So, and my was telling me, hey, dude, you got this. You know what I'm saying? You can do this. You have accomplished this. This is BS. That ego is what set me back. It always set me back, and then
I get what you're saying though, because what you've done is you've shown that, with your work ethic that you did have that was built in from a very early age, you were building these little resume bullets along the way. And so whenever you would question yourself, is the wheels coming off, if you will, you could look back and be like, well, no, the wheels ain't coming off. Look at all these things here I'm checking. Of course I'm checking all these boxes.
Of course.
I'm good. And let's keep going.
Exactly. And from the outside looking in from other people, they're like, oh, he checked that box.
He's like, he's doing fine.
Right.
I want to hound him.
I deserve this.
He's just letting off steam.
It's reasoning. It's just, you justifying negative behavior. And what happens is those negative behaviors become more intense. And then those box checks, they start not to, the negatives start to outweigh the positive. positives, right? And then it's a slow rolling, moving process, you know, into addiction. And addiction was still taboo at the time. There was not a lot of, you know, people talking about it, you know.
There was a certain stigma that came with it. If you said this, then you were labeled whatever that was.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, the validity of the things that you've built up in your life, the person that you saw yourself becoming, suddenly becomes someone different.
100%.
You're a whole new person now, and it's not the one that you wanted to be.
Right.
So you can't admit to it.
I'd say biggest red flags is I take a lot of pride, excuse me, in saying, you know, if 10 a.m. is 10 a.m. If I give you my word, I'm there at 10 a.m. I'm there at 10 a.m. I'm there at 9:45. That's how I'm raised, right? My word started to fade. It wasn't as my handshake didn't mean a lot anymore, and that was a big kick in the butt too, of knowing that. Well, that's unusual. Well, after so many times of that happening, people start looking at you a little different. Rightfully so, they start looking at you different. I'd look at somebody different too if they told me 10 a.m.
And you were not that person before.
Never. I'm not that person.
So that's
now.
the thing. They're looking at the change now. They can. It's tangible.
100% red flag. Those are red flags. Now the thing is, I was such a liar about my addiction that when anybody tried to help, no, you know, who are you to help me? You know, my ego, who are you to say this? No, you know, and
look at all the stuff I'm doing.
Sure.
You ain't done these things.
So
I get it.
Were the red flags? Yeah. Were there people who cared? Sure. I had an older brother at the time. He was graduating from Purdue. He started his life and career in Indianapolis and everything. You know, so from the most part, he could probably see it. You know, I was sleeping in longer. I've never been a sleeper. I was taking naps and never been a nap taker, you know, at that age. And so there were red flags, but I don't know if those red flags were so severe, like, hey, we got to do an intervention or something like that. And I did, most of the time I was figuring out, hey, I can lie about this to do this, to get away with this, you know, so.
You were manipulating your truth.
100% to hurt me and people around me, my family and everything. But yeah, I mean, that's every addict's behavior, right? Like, that's why interventions are so hard, because you're saying, hey, I know you live this life where you do what you want and con and crook and do all this, but be honest, and you got to do it right now. You got to stop this negative behavior, and you need to.
Where the words may be right,
it is.
It's just not going to ring true yet.
It's a
until
big change.
We know you want it to happen, and that's what we're going to hit on. I got to take a quick break.
Sure.
When we come back, there are some very good things that we've already led up to that I really am excited about hearing your take on it. And I know that my listeners, you guys are going to come right back, because the story is too important for you guys not to hear the whole thing. So stick around. We'll be right back after this.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
Welcome back, everybody, from that break. We're here with Mr. Casey Smith. As you know, if y'all been listening, he's led into his story about addiction, how it started. It started out simply enough with some pain pills. At a very early age, he recognized that he had an affinity for them, and that has grown. And now where we are is we're into his early 20s. And he's been sharing with us about how this addiction has started to grow and now has started to become a problem, to the point where he's trying to find reasons to be able to go find it and then hide it. And the lies have started to come in. And the one thing that he's been hitting on as we come back in and bring Mr. Casey back into the conversation is he was talking about how now at this point in his life, truth is the only thing he cares about. It doesn't matter how vulnerable the situation is. He just wants truth. And I think that he's led into that, and we're about to go back into it about why truth is so important, because it sounds to me like, sir, you were living a life of nothing but lies for so long.
100%.
That's why you crave truth so much.
100%.
So jump back in and let us know where we were.
So let me elaborate a little bit on truth, even back then, right? So with addiction and recovery, truth is hard to find. You know, I mean, you can go from the addict's mindset, oh, here, try to sell you this is the best, just to get over on you.
Right.
You can go from the rehabilitation aspect is you go there and they're like salesmen, hey, come to this place, we got your son, we have a 80% success rate. No, BS, you know. So truth is really hard to find with addiction and recovery. So once you find that and you find the people that you can base your recovery with and on, whether it's a higher power, whether it's just a group of people or a system, I'm not opposed to anything, but if it's based in truth, you are much more likely to make advances in a positive light due to truth. It gives you a starting point.
It's mandatory.
Right.
It has to be there, or there's no healing.
Right. Truth can be bad news or good news, but it's still news, and you can only, you know, go from there. You know, if you're looking to improve your life, whether you're here, you know, or all the way down, truth gives you a starting point, a place to stand on. And then if you're really determined to move forward, it's based in truth. So you can, you know, reload a little bit, or, you know, sit back and make a plan.
So Casey, you just talked about this, and I just want to reiterate and kind of put it in a perspective, is that you're talking about where you can get your information from. It's not just about truth, though. It's about who you can trust to be truthful with you.
Right.
How hard is that when you are the addict?
Sure. So I can tell you this from my experience, right?
Yeah.
The people who you hate being around because they're going to give you a hard time
are the ones you probably should be around?
Yep. Probably the people who are telling you the truth. You know, like, let's take my dad, for example. Once he knew about my addiction, and I was years into this, hey, you're being a dumbass. You're not maximizing your potential. You know, you're being an idiot.
And you're like, Dad's just being mean.
No, you're right. Well, you're an addict. You're whiny. You want to, well, Dad's not supportive. And But no. The people like that, a lot of time, you don't need a filter. You need to hear it, right? And I'll get into this later, but that's the reason once I did start getting sober, once I got sober, I had people who held me accountable. I couldn't, you know, schmooze them. You know, I can smile and hey, but you know, I couldn't do that. And once I got around people like that, and a great group of people and counselors who they didn't care what I said. You know, this is what you got to do. You could schmooze me all you want. You could say the sweetest thing. You're not getting anywhere with me. I made progress, right? And then at first, and I won't jump ahead too far here, but the person in particular I'm talking about was a lady named Monica. She not only held me accountable, but at first I hated her with a passion. She's standing in my way of getting high. She's standing in the way of my addiction. She's lying to my family, you know. But throughout time, I started listening to her. I started respecting her, and then I was all into her. I listened to what she recommended. She became a very close personal friend of mine because I trusted her at that point. I knew she wasn't in it for money. I knew she had any interior motives. She was in it to help me.
What are the intentions?
Right.
And that's hard to find sometimes.
Big time.
And let me say this, if you don't mind. And of course, you know, this is not a blanket statement for everybody, but I think that this is pretty true for most. If you are like clear-headed, not addicted to anything, have very few vices, it is hard. I say this from a personal perspective again. It is hard to be self-reflective and critical in a productive way. I think people are self-deprecating a lot of times, and they will be too harsh on themselves in areas where maybe they should give some grace. But the truth is, it's really hard to take and think about where you've come from and why you're doing what you're doing and where you see yourself going when you're clear-headed with no problems.
Right.
Take a person that is addicted, that is already confused and have been lying to themselves for a long period of time. Their body is telling them what they need and what they want. Their mind is telling them how this is okay and how they can still get it. And anybody from the outside trying to tell them or give them advice on what better direction to go, that's not what they want to hear. Of course, they're going to shut that out.
Right.
So my question to you is this, Casey. I know I just used a bunch of words, but I really wanted to build this point here. So my question to you is, you've already led into the fact that you had Miss Monica that come into your life that was doing some big things for you. How does she get to that point? What are the things? What is the path? How long does that take for you to be like, okay, this person's in my corner. So they're not mean.
I would say, so I'm skipping ahead quite a bit here. So this is years down the road. This was, 6 years ago, but let me jump into this. So 6 years ago when I got sober, or this was the start of my sobriety, right? I listened to her in smaller things. Hey, if you keep coming back to our program and showing up and going to meetings and taking the medicine, your life's going to get better. And so there were small little things she said to me while holding me accountable that I did that at first I didn't see the benefits of, right? But after being in there for, a month, I would say a couple months, 1 to 3 months, and then the trust building is really her seeing how much she had my back. I remember a specific time, one time it was a holiday, and we had take-home medicines, right? And I messed up the program. I was supposed to bring back this bottle, right, for you to get more medicine, right? And I didn't bring it back. And she was like, I didn't explain the rules properly. I'm sorry here. I knew she was in my corner because she said to me at the time, even though I didn't tell you this, hey, let's make up with 2 meetings here and we'll get you back on track. I was supposed to restart the program here. Normally they wouldn't care. Hey, you failed here. I could see these slow moving parts of her proving to me like I was somebody who needed to be proved to, but she proved to me that my best interest was at heart. And she would check in when she said she'd call during the week at, 2 p.m. to check on I was doing. 2 p.m. she called. So even though I hated her for selfish reasons because she was standing in the way of my addiction, I slowly built up trust. And she was the first person, man, woman, anybody in getting sober who I just poured all my trust in. 100% what she said, I did. So if she said, hey, I don't think you're doing good here, you need to go to a meeting, I would go to that meeting. There was nobody else like it for me. She was the right type of person, and she was really slick in her own way because she made me think like I was in control for a second, right? Like, hey, okay,
that's why they're a pro.
Right. And no, I wasn't in control. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh, she was good. She was good.
I try that with my kids, but they're smarter than me.
Sure.
So I'm not usually as successful. But
sure.
I know we may have stepped ahead in the story some,
Yep.
but when you mentioned Monica and how that she was a turning point for you, I wanted to make sure we hit clear on how that kind of took place and where that came from. But we could go back now because, one of the things about the storyline is you could do like a flash forward, but then come back to where we were.
Yep.
So when you were going through some of your hardest parts of addiction and you're recognizing that now it's become a problem, because before you saw it as not being a problem because you were able to maintain, it starts to become a problem. Obviously you had people telling you, hey, so you need to do something about this.
Sure. So let me start off where I left off.
Sure.
Come back a little bit. So this is probably around 2012. Like I said at the beginning, I could be getting my dates wrong. So Purdue Pharma owned and produced Oxycontin, right? They made a big documentary on Netflix about. So at first, the Oxycontins they made, you could suck off the codeine or whatever it is on the top, and you could break it down. You could snort it, or if you're an IV user, you can shoot it up. And then out of nowhere, they came up with the product was now referred to as an OP, which you could not suck it off. So you couldn't snort it. You couldn't shoot it. The only way you could take this medicine was orally, water. Yes, right. So what that did, it was like overnight in Indiana, because we have Chicago right here, we have Indy right here. So when that happened, the influx of heroin just rushed the streets right away. I mean, so you saw everybody had Oxycontin at the time, Percocets, Loratab, everything. All of a sudden, when they started making OPs, and you can no longer, the prices jumped for 80s. They went from 50 to 60 to 120 to 150 a pill. Nobody's going to pay that. Nobody. The price double tripled. I saw them for 250 for an 80, which is unheard of. At that point in my addiction, I was 3, 4, 5 Oxy 80s a day. It was not, if I had the money to get 5, I'd do 5 a day. My tolerance was up there at that point, but who can afford that at that time? So once they started making the OPs, the next best thing, if you didn't want heroin was you can get Roxys, which were 15 and 30s, but they weren't anything like Oxycontin. So what did people do? They went to heroin because that was the only thing. It was affordable. And it was there, and we have Chicago and we have Indy right there. So it just flooded the streets. So at first, a lot of people, oh, he's taking prescription pills, because the word heroin, that was in a league of its own. That's when
it's like cocaine use or something. Very taboo.
Right. The worst of the worst, you're using heroin, right? But that's what was available. And everybody went to heroin.
What form were you using?
Was it? You mean
snorting, shooting?
At the very beginning, snorting still. The shooting didn't come until my mid to later 20s, and that's a whole different ballgame, and I'm about to jump into that. Sure. So the bad thing about heroin, you weren't so much worried about fentanyl back then, right? Was, they would cut it with a sleeping aid. It was called Dorman, right? So you never knew what you were getting. When you bought an Oxy 80, or you had a Loratab 10 or 5 or 7.5, you knew what you were getting, right? You did not know what you were getting when you bought heroin. So it's
street made.
You're right. So you have to test it out. right? And see, so if you're putting it in a spoon or chopping up a line, you don't know what's going into you. It's not regulated like pharmaceuticals were. You follow? So when you get this, it was a dangerous game at first. And then slowly you started seeing, an OD happened, an OD. You didn't see it too often, the overdoses with OxyContin, unless you shot it. That's the only time you saw ODs. But when heroin flooded, all of a sudden you really started seeing ODs. And then when people started shooting it, and then when fentanyl came, then it was like, man, 2-3 out of 5 people were dropping like flies. I mean, anytime you look at an obituary, anybody under 35 years old, right away you assumed an OD.
And to the same conversation piece we had earlier, it hits all demographics, all age groups. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. People were getting it. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic from Memphis, worked in South Memphis, some of the harder areas of the city of Memphis, which is a lot like Chicago in its own way, just a smaller city, but the crime's still up there. The drug use is still up there. We were making the same person over and over and over that was overdosing. And then we were making tons, once the fentanyl hit the scene, tons of DOAs that you could not bring back.
100%. And that's why, the big debate, a whole bunch of people are talking is, nowadays is, what do you do? What can you do? I mean, you could say it starts at home, but you can't control what happens in schools, right? You can't, there's only so many things that you can do. And then you have to put trust in your kids, your family, your relatives to, not make a poor choice. Because as a kid, when you used a drug, the worst thing you did, you got grounded, right? You smoked pot, you're grounded. Now you die.
Now you die.
Right?
You don't get around to.
Right. So it doesn't happen every time, but you're playing Russian roulette. You don't know what it's laced with. You think you're buying cocaine, that's fentanyl. You think you're buying heroin, it's 99% fentanyl, so you don't know. I mean, it's a different ball game. And I really started to see it at the end, especially with fentanyl. And at the time when I was in my addiction, I love fentanyl. It has something called a short half-life. It doesn't last long, but that rush you get as soon as that plunger goes down in your arm, it's euphoric. It's amazing. You think it is. You take an OxyContin 80, you're good for hours. You take fentanyl, you're good for a half hour. Then you need another.
Really?
Right. So
did you have people around you that were doing it with you?
I ran around by myself for the most part, and that was just out of shame. Or I had the same group of people. Unfortunately, majority of them are dead. All of them are dead. There's a few people left that are still survived. But I would say through my 10 years of addiction or so, the real people I use with daily, 8 of them are dead. I can name the 2 who are alive. I won't just because they're not out publicly about it. But 2, I could go on. And these are good people we lost, man.
Oh, look, and that's one thing about me that I do find the benefit of having the background that I have is that I realize a lot of people get labeled. We've already talked about that, like certain types of drugs put a certain type of label on a person. Right. I'm fortunate in the fact that I've lived through so many different things and had so many different friends experience the same stuff and then running those calls.
Sure.
You would make a call. I'm very serious. I don't want to take your floor from you because this is all about you, but I'm just using this as one example. Sure. I remember a call that I made and it was this really large house in a nice part of Memphis, nice cars out front. I go in the front door and everybody in there is like, they're having drinks and they're talking and it's jovial. And it's like, I'm here for a person that drug overdosed. Right. And it's like, I'm in a movie and they're like, she's at the end of the hall. I go down the end of the hall, open this door. There's nothing in the room but a mattress, a beautiful girl that's in her 20s, pissed herself, laying on the mattress, half coherent. And what I realized, the parents have checked out.
Sure.
They don't see anything that they can do for this person.
Right. And you could say, hey, we have Narcan on site, but I mean, it starts way, way, way before then.
Sure.
A funny story, not too funny. It kind of shows how dumb I was at the time. When I first went to rehab for the first time, I went to a place in Indianapolis. It's called Fairbanks. And I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going to be in there. I remember in my intake process, I was like, I don't want to be around any drug addicts, from the streets, some junkies and all these low life people, in my mind, I was above these people, right? Not knowing as soon as I got in there, nothing like it. Like you just explained, nice house, nice cars, great family. That's who I was. I was people just like me. People just like me. They come from all forms. I mean, with the cost of rehab, first off, you have to either have good insurance or enough cash to pay out of pocket, right, to get in there. So I'm around people that were just like me, way above me. I mean, from Carmel, Indiana, from different parts of Chicago, people with great careers, great families, wealth. It does not discriminate.
It doesn't discriminate.
I mean, I don't want to say names, but there was a guy in particular. I went and afterwards I did something called SLP. It's an acronym for supportive living Living program. And we went to visit his family one day at their house, and I rode with him. We pulled up. First off, he had to type in 20 numbers to get through his $1 million gate to get to his family house. And I was like, whoa, this is not what you expect to go to rehab. And these aren't what you expect this type of people to meet. So when I say these are all forms in life, I wish people knew the truth and people were more public with who struggles. Because if you saw how it does not discriminate, we're talking doctors I know personally, lawyers I know personally. So if you want to base it off of some sort of accomplishments and degrees, well, I know a million of them who are doctors and lawyers who struggle from addiction, right? Whether it's alcoholism, opiates, amphetamines, whatever. Addiction is a really strange thing, because you never know if more people were out in the open with this and talked about it publicly, which is their choice to whether or not they want to go that route or not. But it's so vast, man. I mean, there's so many different people. Like I said, I've met the greatest form of people, this collective group of everything, I mean, the greatest. I mean, there's not just like, oh, that religion doesn't use opiate. It's not like that. It's everybody. I've been in there with every culture, with every race, good people, great people, bad people. I mean, just the combination of people I've been in programs.
There's one
with.
factor, human.
Yep, human. Yep.
That's it.
Yep, and we're all speaking the same lingo. We're dealing with something we can't control, right? So you're this clash of people that are sitting together who have no similarities, or maybe they do, but we're all trying to solve the same issue, and we're trying to get to this level of peace, and peace being sobriety, and it's really unique. I mean, that's a part of sobriety that I love, is seeing the people. You go to a good NA group meeting, and you can see it there. You got construction guys, you got a doctor, you got a lawyer, and then you got the guy hosting the meeting, and he's in charge, right? Because he's sober. He said, hey, this is what's worked for me. And the collective group of people is just amazing to see. I can't speak about it enough. It's just so impressive. And that's one thing I didn't expect.
I'm not going to, look, I'm going to tell you something. All right. So this is very off the cuff.
Sure.
I don't know what it is about you, man. I do know, actually. I think that we're brothers in another place.
Sure.
I want to share something that I've never shared publicly.
Sure.
Your conversation you just had with me hit. I know. It's very unscripted. I've never shared this publicly, ever, not once. But because of what you're saying, I feel like I need to right now. I need to put this in this conversation right here. I grew up in a great family, small story. Grew up in a great family, went to church my whole life. And I got into being a paramedic when my son was 4 years old. I grew up telling my son the dangers of drugs, leading him down the right path, letting him see it, being very open, never keeping things back from him as he got older, and explained to him on so many levels how you will be around people that will put you in a position to make a bad choice.
Right.
On January 19th, 2017, I got a phone call that my son was in the hospital and they didn't know what was wrong with him. So I show up at the ER and his lips are blue. They had called the chaplain. And they couldn't find out what was wrong. And they had done a spinal tap. And they had given him 6 milligrams of Narcan. And nothing was working and they weren't sure what was going on. Thankfully, it started to work and he came out of it. And he told me that he had snorted heroin for the first time. And he almost died.
Sure.
Casey, when I tell you that you're right, there's no demographic it won't hit. I've never told that story publicly, ever, until right now. And I feel like I needed to, because I need people to know what you're saying and just how true that is.
Right. I'll follow up with this. First off, thank you for sharing that. It shows what I'm getting at. Secondly, the conversations that we have, that I've had, with people just like you who say at the beginning, nothing. They're just wanting to listen. Then I say something, or it doesn't have to be me. Somebody says something and it hits a chord with them and they say, hey, by the chance. I can't tell you how many times this same scenario has happened. This is why I love this conversation. I'm so passionate about it. Damn it, I love this conversation is because truth comes out, right? Nobody wants to admit, hey, Coach Camp, how you doing? Oh, great. But in the inside, you're like, damn, I'm dealing with this. My son this just happened to my kid. Nobody wants to just come out and say this. When it's relatable and more people are honest and upfront and truth is out there, that's when change occurs, right? Change didn't occur if everybody's sitting back hiding all these their dirty laundry. And I'm not saying come out publicly every time and say, hey, I went through this, because everybody would sound, crazy at that point. But the gold in these conversations, you start to see, hey, I'm not alone in this, man. I'm not. Like, I go back to, and I will not say this, but something recently, let me go back a little further. On Christmas Day, my local news did a story about recovery with all of us. We're all here, right? And the story was on me and my path from addiction to recovery with sobriety and being a business owner and giving back to the community, right? I did not know how people would receive that message. I know I've been passionate about this. I know Scott and Kurt know about my past. My assistant knows about my past. For the most part, people who are close to me knows about my past. I've had, in the last 2 months, and I won't say names out of respect to them, we had a client who lost a sister to addiction. Greatest family in the world. I mean, what a fantastic family. It's a husband and wife, and they have 5 kids, and you could just see it, how engaged they were with these conversations. That was my big eye-opener one. That was number 1. Number 2, something that happened to me 2 Sundays ago. I called Scott and his wife right away, and they know I'm not an emotional guy. I don't tear up. I don't cry. I try not to, I was at our local, DNR. So it's a place called DNR, and they serve meats, right? The butcher's there and everything. It's a really, really good place. And I have my son with me, and I'm in my mind, I need to be in and out of DNR. I need my steaks. I need to go cook. A butcher who I was first in line. There's 2 guys behind me, and he said, "Hey, man, you mind if I serve them first?" I was a little taken aback. Sure, whatever. I don't know the reason being. I don't know this human being. I never talked to this guy besides putting my order in. He serves these 2 people, and he goes in the back, and he gets his dad. And his dad comes out, and now nobody's around. It's 2 butchers and me, and I'm holding my son. And he says to me, "Hey, I just want to let you know, your news story really hit home with us." This guy was so proud to show me his 1 year sobriety. Hey, my son's back. It meant that I left there. I called him right away, and I was like, I wish you could be here for this. This is better than winning the lottery to me. It really is. If you give me $1 million cash right now, it won't copy the feeling I have leaving there. It will not. I swear, hand to God, I mean that. I truthfully do. That's what makes it worth it. This man who I've never met and this butcher's son are sitting here scrolling through one of the, I don't know, it wasn't Facebook. It was, I'm not a TikTok guy. Maybe it was TikTok. And he was showing me these old threads of, hey, the last year, that meant the world to me. Yeah. I'm relating to somebody related to my news story, me opening up, being truthful. It was worth any amount of money, any experience I ever had. I made a difference in another human being's life. That's gold. That's value. And it's not a difference. It's a positive difference, right? When you get that feeling, you can't buy that feeling. There's no drug that's going to give you a feeling. There's a human being in this world who I positively impacted with my challenging story, right? That I thought I would never get out of. And now I'm open and being honest. I was a liar through my addiction. I did nothing. I lied. I conned, whatever it took. And now the honesty, and now it's truth, and it's based off of something. There's principles, there's morals, there's values. And to see that happen on a Sunday at 2:30 p.m. when I was not expecting it, it was just a slow Sunday, beautiful Sunday, and that happened. I was on cloud 9, man.
Casey, I'll tell you, that's one of the things about me being a public speaker, because beyond the podcast, I do motivational speeches, I do keynote speeches. And the one thing that I have found that endures you to the crowd, where they not just hear your message, but they feel your message, is when you allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Sure.
I think that's one of the toughest things people have, is wanting to put up those walls.
Especially for men. Especially for men. Like you said, you're a retired firefighter. It's very hard for guys, to not look vulnerable, right? We don't want to complain. We want to be tough. We want to be the leaders of our family. We want to, come off. We got it under control. You don't want to see weakness. Right. And that's natural, right? For a grown man. I think there's a difference when those type of grown men, us, everybody here, can say, hey, I deal with this. And then you say, hey, this is my experience. Yep. It doesn't have to be a pat on the back or a cry on the shoulder. You get a lot of value just realizing, hey, dude, we're in this thing together. This game of life we deal with, right? Same game, different name.
So I felt like I needed to share that moment because you were building the story of the idea that this is, there are no predetermined names, people that these things can hit.
Right.
It can hit at any time out of the most innocent of moments and change your life forever. So Casey, all I want you to share is at this point, when do you make that decision? How old are you? How many years of addiction have you dealt with? Because one thing that we have talked about before the show started was a person doesn't change until they make the decision they want to change.
Right.
All the great advice in the world doesn't matter until that individual is like, okay, I need to make a change.
Sure. So I'm going to fast forward a little section we missed. First off, my addiction got way worse after that.
Okay.
Started taking a lot of benzos, which are Xanax, Klonopins, right? By after the Oxycontin, I moved into heroin. I snorted for a few years, and then I moved on to using it intravenously, right? That was a whole different ballgame. That is a whole different part of desperation and living low and pain that, whether it's physical or mental, that a human being is not supposed to experience. And that went on for years. That was my last straw. Once you start using the needle, there's no step above. You can't do nothing. You can just use more, and eventually you die. Somebody's around you, they don't have Narcan. There's somebody, you're by yourself, you die, right? That's what you risk, right? And when I say my addiction and habit not only was expensive, but my tolerance was up there. I mean, I'm not bragging about this, but I've never met a human being who could put more drugs in their body than I could. At the very end of my benzo addiction that ran right with my opioid addiction, it was nothing for me to eat a handful of 25, 30 footballs in a sitting. Those are 1 milligram Xanax. Nothing. You give me 15 2 milligram bars, Xanax bars, I will eat them in one sitting. Nothing. They didn't make me high. Wow. They didn't make me fall out. They made me normal, right? So you can die from two different types of withdrawals, alcohol and benzos. The fact that I didn't die of benzo withdrawal, I don't know. Usually you seizure, you die, especially with a tolerance like that, because I didn't wean myself off from that. Maybe I did because I didn't have the money to get as many as I would like, but my addiction was through the roof, whether it was multiple grams a day, of heroin. And if I found somebody who had enough Xanax to last me for a couple days, I would eat them. Because sleeping was a big thing, right? So that was a really important part of my story is once you go over these little lines that you tell yourself you're never going to cross. Lying and thieving is really at the beginning. Then snorting is another line. But once you cross the line of putting a needle in your arm, things change, man. Not only you're beat down, you're broken by that point. You're scarred up. You're wearing sweatshirts in 102 degree heat because you're hiding your track marks. The level of pain that you suffer.
How old were you at this point?
Mid to late 20s at that point. 25, 6, 7, 8. I got sober at 29, so partial 29, and I'm leading into my recovery at this point. So I was so low. My money's gone. My friends, my resources are gone. I just needed to put a needle in my arm. And if I had $1 million, I'd find a way to do $1 million worth of Xanax and heroin. It'd be nothing to me. I did what I could afford that day. And I always did something. There was never days. I had nothing. I wasn't a dad yet. I didn't have a girlfriend, a job, a career, nothing. I was a full-time junkie. And that term does not hurt my feelings. It doesn't. Well, I got to be real with myself here. I wasn't just a drug addict. I put the needle in my arm. I was a junkie. I was a full-blown junkie. I would rob you and your wallet right now if I needed it. When I will smile to your face and I will rob you from the back right this second once I put that needle in my arm. And I would. Nobody can trust me, and that's me being honest with you. There was no rules. I didn't fear jail at that point. I needed to survive, man. You think I gave a damn about jail? I was in hell. You couldn't put me in a cage. The only thing I feared was not being able to get more drugs.
Proverbially rock bottom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'll lead into my rock bottom, right? But I couldn't get much lower, right? I was living in a vehicle that had no gas. I was driving around in a truck that had no brakes. These are no exaggerations. I got witness. I'm telling you, right? I would do if you gave me money for gas, that was gas for my arm. There was no gas going in my car. I didn't give a damn about gas. I had an addiction to take care of, right? And then things started to change. So here's my rock bottom, right? these guys have heard this story. I've told it so many times to them, blue in the face. I had one thing I always feared, and this is you call me girl, I don't care. I'm not a jail guy. I can't do jail.
I don't think I would do well.
I don't like systems. I don't like being a number in a system. And I don't like the thought of not being able to wake up and do whatever the hell I want and what I'm used to doing. Mm-hmm. For the first time in my life as an adult, I got pulled over on the busiest road in our town that we grew up with, the city of Lafayette. It was off 26. Truth be told, I wasn't running from the cops. My charges were resisting with a vehicle. The truth was I was high, and I had Tom Petty, and I was on my way to get some food. Beautiful Friday night. I was in my mother's car. Beautiful Friday night. I was feeling good, man. I got the video too. It's nuts. So here's some eye openers, right? So I got arrested for the first time in my life. That was August 5th, I think it was. 2 weeks before that, my grandmother died. My grandmother from Germany, which was my person, man. I mean, even as a down and out junkie, I could go to my grandma's, and my grandma didn't lie to me. Hey, you're screwing up, with her thick German accent. Mm-hmm. She's giving it to me. I love the woman. I've held her on a pedestal my whole life. I got her initials right here on my arm. She was special to me, man. That all happened in a 2-week period, and that was really the beginning to my rock bottom. And then what happened was my parents paid to get the video, so I was able to get an attorney here in town, back at our city. And my ego, I didn't want to stop using drugs. I was still using hardcore, right? So in my mind, I was like, man, I'm going to sue the police department. They wrongfully convicted me. I was high as a kite. I don't remember it. So here's my big eye opener, right? And I'm the loudest one. No, these cops need payback. I'm suing them, right? My lawyer's assistant calls me one day. She's like, hey, dash cam videos in, body cam videos in, come down. I was excited. Oh, I'm going to beat this.
Because it wasn't what you remembered.
No, baby.
In your head, you had something else that had happened.
My ego was like, I'm suing these people, right? Yeah. I did nothing wrong. And this was my light bulb, my aha. Same with the arrest, same with my grandma. This was all in a short amount of time. 2-month period, all three. I get down to my lawyer's office, and they pull up this video. I have never seen myself from the outside looking in. Never once. I've always been from here. So to see myself in that video, and I was just a sick person. Sick. I was sick from the drugs. I was beat down. I was sick. I was filthy. I haven't showered forever. I'm nasty. I got a beard. I can't even grow a damn beard. I got track marks all over me. And my memory failed me. That's not the arrest I remembered.
Yeah.
I was guilty. You
had a new reality.
I had a reality, and I never seen it before. And the shame that came from that, for some reason, this past 10 years of my addiction just hit me hard. It did. It hit me so hard. It's like, whoa, this is what people have been talking about and seeing. This is not what I've been seeing. Mm-hmm. I just see this.
Yeah.
This is what I see. I know what I experience.
And the thoughts that are up here are justifying.
Yeah, everything. My brain's playing tricks on me. I'm a decent human being. But to see myself with handcuffs on, track marks, me slurring my speech, how they didn't give me an OWI, I'll never know. I have no idea. I got resisting with a vehicle. Never been in trouble with the law. I don't, I respect law enforcement. I'm no fool. I don't think I'm bigger, better than anybody. No, I've, for the most part, whatever. But to see that happen, that was a big one for me. So this all just kind of jams in such a short amount of time because I got sober on accident. And I say this, I was ready years ago to be sober. I didn't know how to be sober. I didn't know where to start, who to call, what to do. I just knew I was tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
I was done. I just needed a little bit of something, whether it was jail. Is that going to do it? Which I wasn't looking at time or anything, but what is it going to come to for me to get my act together? So I was stressed about the arrest. I was torn apart about my grandmother's death. And then to see myself from the outside looking in, it's a combination of those three things in that short span of time while I was still using every day. I was still slamming it down and popping those benzos, man. But I had this moment I had slowly these moments of clarity. And I don't know what it is, you could say whatever you want about it, but I've had a few experiences around that time where I knew it was time. So I had a buddy who's dead now. I won't say his name. My mother saw at a grocery store, and he asked how I was doing, and she knew he suffered with addiction in his past too. Mm-hmm. They started talking. I remember my mother, I call my mother Mutti. So if I say the word Mutti, it's German.
Talking about mom.
Yes, mom. So Mutti comes home, and she's like, hey, I just saw so-and-so at the store. There's a place here in town, because I never wanted to travel. I don't want to go to Florida for rehab. I was tired of Fairbanks. I did the Sycamore Springs. I've done every program, the SLPs, the IOPs, inpatient, the detox, everything. I've seen shrinks. None of it worked. I wasn't ready for it to work. There's not a program.
As we said, it's got to be you.
Right.
You got to make that decision.
I did, I did detox. I forget, it was 21 times with SLPs, so 22 times total. None of it worked. I wasn't ready. I beat the system, right? Every time you put me in inpatient, I say, hey, you take Suboxone. After you're done taking the Suboxone, you're here for 3 days. Okay, so what if I don't take the Suboxone? Well, your program's shorter then. I wouldn't take the Suboxone. I found a way to beat the system. Going back a little bit to what I was just saying is, once that Mutti came home and she was telling me who she talked to, that's the place Monica worked at. And my mother, man, she was good. She conned me for the first time. She said, because by that point I'd do whatever to get money. I had an addiction support. She said, hey, I'll give you $50 a day. You go up there with me. I'll bring you every day. I didn't have a license. I just got my license taken away. $50 a day. I'll bring you up there every morning. She's retired at that point. I lived in her house. I'll bring you every morning, 6 a.m. $50 before. She'd give me $50. I'd get high. I'd go back home. We'd go up there. And it was a slow process at first. So we'd go there, and I met the counselors, and they had different forms of what they do there. There was methadone maintenance. They had resources to Subutex and Suboxone, and I have done none of it, right? None of it in the past. I just in and out of rehabs. I never was really prescribed anything that was supposed to help me. I liked opiates. I liked benzos. That's what I wanted. If you weren't talking about those two things, why are we talking, right? Yeah. But I got involved with that program, and my mother, like clockwork, would wake me up every day. Here's $50. When you get back, you're going. And I went. And this was 7 days a week. And that was like that probably for 6 months, maybe a year. I don't remember. I mean, it might have been a year and a half. I know it was 6 months because it was so damn long before I was able to start getting my crap together and getting a job and being able to afford a vehicle, right? And it was this is how low I was.
And how old were you at that time?
29 years old.
Okay.
29 years old. I had nothing. Yeah. Not a thing. Not a dollar to my name. Not a car. Nothing. I had people around me who haven't left yet. That's what I had. I didn't want to see you. If you were a friend, I didn't talk to this man for 10 years because of my addiction. I just didn't. We didn't do the same drugs, so what are we around each other for, right? I had a lot of shame, right? I wanted to be by myself, but I took so much pride. This sounds so corny and so weird, but the only thing I looked forward to after a couple of weeks was going to that place because I didn't drive. I didn't have friends, sober friends, right? So I looked forward to 6 a.m. every day. I was up by 4 a.m. every day, and it was slow progress. There was things that I did. I was weak. My body was beat. I mean, I was the skinniest fat guy you'll ever meet in your life because my body was beat down. I was bloated. I mean, constipated. I was disgusting, dude. Track marks all over me. But slowly, throughout that time, when Mutti was bringing me up there, I met people who were at that program for the right reasons. And it started off, hey, I'm Casey. I'm da-da-da. Then I'd see him again the week later. So I was developing positive relationships. I had nothing to offer.
Going through the same battle.
Same battle. I had nothing to offer. Nothing. I didn't have a penny in my pocket. I didn't own a business. I had nothing. Yep. Nothing. This were just people that were in the same crappy situation trying to do better. And then in my personal life at home, I said, hey, I'm going to try to start eating a little better. I'm going to start lifting a weight. I've done a lot to my body. So there's these small victories that I started to do. Instead of any money I had at that point before I had my business, I went out to eat and tried to eat healthy. I went to Core Life. I was just trying to improve my life for all the years I just beat it up. And then that's when the counselors came in who I was referring to, Monica. And then even when a lot of people, the people that were around me, were positive people. And then that grew because then I was like, hey, Monica's like, you need to go to a meeting here. And then I met people in this meeting who were just like me. And they're, hey, my name's, I won't say his name, but I met a good buddy. He's 60 years old. He's a good buddy of mine because he was there for the same reasons. I'd get breakfast with his guys. He's sober still. This is 5 years ago. These are great relationships, great people. I don't give a damn where they come from in life or where they at or what they do for a living. I know he's a good person. I know he was with me when at my lowest and he's at his lowest and we did this thing together, right? I mean, and so the point I'm getting at is I had positive people around me. There was no schmoozing going on. We weren't trying to con somebody to get money and use drugs or find a way to beat the system. It was the first time in my life where I wanted to be a part of a system, and I never thought I'd say those words ever. I totally gave myself into this place, so much so I wanted to know how I could be the ideal patient. And let me tell you something, Coach. Here's a big... I've told Scott this story so many damn times, it's crazy. I don't know if there's a better feeling in life than when I've passed a drug test, honestly, for the first time. I don't. It was me and my mother who celebrated. Boy, you would have thought I was a billionaire. I just won $1 billion. I ran to my mom's car once this doctor told me, hey, you passed a drug test. I was emotional, man. Mom, I passed a drug. I'm 29 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a loser, man. Mom, I passed this. We were so excited. We're going to Logan's tonight. You know, looking back on it, it was nuts how low I was, but there's no better feeling. There was none. I did it the honest way. I wasn't sneaking in pissed to pass a drug test or what can I spew together to pass this one. No, I walked in there, no anxiety. I passed a drug test. And nobody understands that feeling besides addicts who are in recovery, who are sober. They know what I mean. They know what I mean when they finally are starting to make progress, when they sleep and they wake up and they don't have those nightmares, about a line by their nose or a needle by their arm, and then they wake up. They know when they start, making real progress, right? It's slowly, at the beginning, you take baby steps, and then you take leaps. And then after that, man, you're flying. I use all these corny analogies because they're true. I use these analogies because they're true. And sometimes I get ahead of myself being around business guys and my people and everything, and I kind of lose sight of those small victories I had. Man, those feelings of those small victories are better than any feelings I experienced today.
Yeah, I want to share this with you, Casey, because you've hit on several things here. And by the way, you're a great talker. In fact, I don't know how we'll ever do this, but we're going to do some kind of podcasting, I think, maybe where we just talk every week because it's an easy conversation, man.
Sure.
Here's what I heard, and this is putting it into a context that really are broad spectrum. I think about people that were athletes with me growing up. And then now they've fallen off over the years. Me personally, I'm a distance runner. So I've ran several marathons, and a person will come to me and they're like, hey, look, I was thinking about trying to get in, but I can't run a marathon. I'm like, why are we thinking about a marathon?
No kidding.
Let's go with the 5K. Let's start somewhere smaller right now and build up. And if that's something that you would want to achieve,
love where you're getting at.
Let's start low. And then as you build each of these wins, we'll get you to the marathon.
Oh, buddy, I'm going to jump off from this subject. Keep
and
going.
Isn't that about life? Isn't that about everything that we deal with? Stop thinking about the top of the mountain. You got to start at the base.
People talking
Work
about
up.
Yes. Run a damn mile, half mile,
1
quarter
mile.
mile.
Just start somewhere.
Whatever. Yes.
You got to start somewhere.
Same goes with recovery. You have these people, you need to go to a detox and stay here. No. Let's be realistic here. It's like a person trying to lose weight. You can't just take away food from them. Let's have small goals. Let's get a baseline established, right? And for an addict like me this doesn't work a lot of times, but like I was saying the story with my mom, let's just go back to the program. Every day you got to show up, right? It's in and out. You're there for an hour. Let's start small. You don't need to just fly across the United States and stay for 10 years at some recovery center. Let's be realistic about our goals, right? Like a person trying to lose weight, don't starve yourself.
And don't think about what you used to be.
Right.
Oh, it used to be 160. Great.
Yes.
If you want to get back to 160, let's start from your 250 right now. Let's get to 245.
People get so caught up of looking at things, in particular addiction, in a macro sense, when really at the beginning they should be looking at it in a micro sense. You follow what I'm saying here?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything has to be that way in life.
Once you get a baseline, I keep using the word baseline. You
got to know where you're at.
You got to know where you're at, man. If you're using 3 grams in your arm every day and taking 30 Xanax every day, that's your baseline. That's where you start. How do we get better from that baseline? It's a starting point. Yeah, what a great analogy you
Let
just
me tie all of this in, if you don't mind, real quick, because here's what I've seen today. So I know we're getting long here, and it's one of those conversations where you don't want to interject and you don't want to shorten the message because the message is so important. It's the whole reason why you're here. Here's what I've heard. Follow me. I'm about to do that Coach Camp thing I do. We have a person who had no intentions to make bad choices in their life. They were brought up in a structured environment where opportunities abounded. You found yourself in a very honest situation where you have a surgery and you realize, hey, this thing is not, this makes me feel a certain way. Yep. Some years later, you chase that a little bit, and then all of a sudden, it's so small. It's almost like there's this little fissure in the dam, and there's just a little bit of water leaking, and nobody thinks anything of it. It's like the dam's not going to break. We're fine. There's no problem here. And then suddenly that thing starts to crack open more and more. And then all of a sudden the whole dam breaks and the water's rushing out and you can't stop it and you don't know where to turn and you don't know how it even got to the place that you're at right then. And now all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, all I can think about is what's next for me? How do I do my next thing? Yep. How do I do my next trick? Yep. What is the situation I've got to do to make me feel better right this second? And you lose sight of the big picture. And what it took, what I heard was that one moment in your life where you hit a stretch of time where things came together and you're like, I can't be this person because I won't be this person forever. I will die or I've got to get better. And you started making those choices. And it took something like getting arrested, seeing yourself for the first time from the outside, having a person believe in you and get in a corner, and then not think to yourself, you got to have the answer tomorrow. Right. You got to step towards that one day at a time. And that's what you've done. And to my listeners, that's what you've got to do. If you're struggling with addiction, if you're struggling with anxiety or depression, I want you to know tomorrow can be better, but you got to start today. And it's got to be small baby steps. And don't think about the end product. Think about the next product. Yep. And go one step at a time, sir. And that's what you've done today, and that's what you've shared.
I appreciate it. Couldn't agree more. I'm going to elaborate one point you made. Sorry, control freak here. Use the analogy about the dam breaking. Starts with a crack. The dam wouldn't have broke if we would have addressed the crack. And that's what I think people, and I go back to that word truth, is being truthful. This is a small issue right now. Could this issue get bigger? If you're truthful with yourself, then fix the crack before the dam breaks, right?
That's it.
Right, and it just leads back to honesty.
Self-reflected.
Yep.
Don't throw something away when you recognize there's a problem. Don't say, well, that's not going to be a problem. Address it.
Deal with it. Deal with it. That's life. Deal with it.
Yes.
100% couldn't agree more.
And it could be anything from anybody, from any situation. Casey, we could talk forever, but it is at that time of the evening. Is there anything you want to add to this before we finish up?
No. Great conversations. Love what you do.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
for having us, man.
What advice would you give my listeners for a final thought?
I've been asked this question a whole bunch. It's not so much advice as it is reflection.
Okay. Right?
From my experience and everything I've been through, first off, don't give up. I don't give a damn where you come from, who you are or were. I care about where you are right now. And when I say reflection, I go back to tell yourself the truth. Find your baseline and don't give up. Like, I swear to God to you right now, there's no listener right now who's dealing with something that I haven't dealt with in regard to addiction. None. Zero. I could tell you some gross things that I had to get myself out of bed for. I was so sick, throwing up, shitting on myself. This is fact. This is what's happened. So we're going back to a final message. Be honest with yourself. Accept the help. Accept the help. Don't be afraid of it. And the biggest message is it does get better. I swear to God, it gets better. If you survive and quit using, it will get better. I can't promise you a date. I can't give you a timeline. I won't give you a date or a timeline. I'd be lying. But I will say it gets better. And don't search for happiness. Search for peace. That's the biggest one. That's a message I forgot to get out there. When you get clean, people search for happiness. I need to be happy. I need to be happy. How many people are happy? We don't know. Very few are continuously happy all the time. You're looking for peace, not happiness. That's my message. Look for peace, not happiness. And only people who relate to that message are people who've been through it, and they'll know what I mean by that. Peace is what makes you sleep. Peace is what makes you happy to look in the mirror and comfortable with who you are. Happiness is temporarily. That's all I got.
Yep. Casey, I tell you what, man, your testament it speaks volumes. I mean, you come down here from Indiana, you bring some friends, y'all do a little fishing trip, and it's all about not Casey, the successful businessman that I am today. It's how did I get to this point? Well, I had to go through hell for a minute. Yep. But you know what? If you keep stepping, you'll find yourself on the other side.
Sure.
Get yourself some good people, be around them, make some good choices, and at the end, trust that it can happen. I want to say thank you to my listeners for tuning in. Continue to send me the comments. Look, we're worldwide now, so if you know somebody that has a great story, always reach out to me. I get about a dozen a week. I love that. Continue to reach out to me. Tune in every day. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe. Go to my social media site, motivatewithcoachcamp.com. And until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe